blah, 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 blah. This is brake fluid. I'm gonna show you how to fill it.
Alright, so today we're going to show you the hardest thing to check on your car, and that would be, as everybody should know, your windshield wiper fluid.
As a disclaimer, this video is made for people who have never done anything like this before. If you have done something like this, cool. Don't comment under the video talking about how stupid it is. This is for people who have never done it before.
Yeah, so enjoy. Alright, so today we're going to show you how to check and fill your fluids in your car. Everything, including coolant levels, of course, power steering fluid. We're going to check your brake fluid. We're going to show you how to check and fill your refrigerant. And then, of course, the oil is the easiest. Everybody should know. And unfortunately, or fortunately, it depends on how you look at it, we both drive manuals. So we don't have a car that has checkable transmission fluid, you know what I mean? So we're still gonna talk about it, but we're not gonna be able to show that in this car. All right, so here's how you check your oil level. So whenever you come over, mine's a little different than most cars. Most cars that I've seen have this symbol on top of the dipstick. Okay, but my car just has a little red dipstick right here to indicate where dipstick is for the oil, of course. So you just pull that up, okay, pull it all the way out. Doesn't really matter how smooth you do, and you got to wipe this liquid that's already on it, because you're not going to get a good reading by just doing that, because it's been sitting there for a while. Okay, so after it's clean, there's no more liquid on it, and you can see where the liquid's going to be. You go ahead and smoothly stick it back in all the way, and then pull it back out, and you look at it, and you can see my liquid is right there up to the second one almost, which is high. That's where you want it to be. Okay, so that's real simple. That's how you check it. You want to check it whenever it's cold though, because whenever it's hot, the oil has been circulating around your engine, going up to the top and stuff, and it's going to give you an inaccurate reading. So you want it to be cold, that way all the oil's sitting at the bottom. All right, so mine was full, so I didn't need to fill it. But if you do, what you need to do is you need to find your oil cap. And mine's right here, of course. It's gonna have the symbol, or it's gonna say oil or something like that above it. Typically, it'll tell you the weight that you need to, the weight of the oil that you need to put in it. Mine doesn't.
All right, so one thing that people struggle with is deciding which oil they need, or trying to choose which oil would be better for their vehicle. When it comes to the weight of the oil, this normally nobody understands what it means. They're just told what they need to get. But this actually means, so the 5 is the viscosity or the thickness of the oil when it's cold. That W stands for the winter. So it would be the thickness of it once you cold start it, if it's like cold outside. The 5 is a thicker, it would be a thicker oil when it's cold, because as the oil heats up, it thins out. And then the secondary number is, like what I was just saying, once the oil heats up, that's the viscosity or the thickness of the oil after it's already warm and it's moving through your motor. So if you were to take, this one's a 5W20, but if you were to take like a 5W30 and a 10W30, those would be the same oil once it's warm. It's just different thicknesses when it's cold. All right, so I'm gonna show you how you would check the transmission fluid on a vehicle. This specific vehicle doesn't have transmission fluid because it's a manual. Or it has transmission fluid, but it doesn't have a dipstick that you can check. If you were coming to check the transmission fluid, depending on what the car was, if it was a rear-wheel drive or front-wheel drive, you know, depending on how the motor was turned, it would change where the dipstick would be located. You would have to, I would find the dipstick before you go and, you know, try and start the car, because you also have to start the car to properly check the transmission fluid, because that's to circulate inside the transmission. On a rear-wheel drive car, it'll normally be at the back side of the motor, on the firewall side. It could be on this side or it could be on that side. It kind of just varies depending on what they decided to do with that. If it's a front-wheel drive car where the motor is sideways, it can vary. It would be on the opposite side of whatever side the serpentine belt is, because the transmission is on the back half of the motor. So say if this was a front wheel drive car, the motor's this way, this was the serpentine belt, your transmission fluid dipstick would probably be somewhere in this vicinity because the transmission would be on this half of the car. If it was flipped around, you know, it'd be on that side. So pretty much just opposite side of whatever your serpentine belt would be on. So when you're going to get the transmission fluid for your vehicle, you want to make sure you get the OE recommended fluid because not every transmission, but most transmissions take in different fluid. Some transmissions, like this, say this is it's a Beamer, it'll have probably the same transmission fluid as another Beamer, but it won't have the same transmission fluid as, like, say a Honda or a Ford or something like that. So you just got to make sure you get the one that your car calls for. You don't want to ruin your transmission by just putting fluid in it. When you check it, if you want to turn the car on, you can either leave it in park or you can pull your e-brake and put it in neutral. You can do it either way. Alright, so some vehicles, the dipstick will have a hot and cold mark telling you where to check it if it was hot or cool. If it was cool, you would check it with the car off. I don't recommend doing it that way. I don't think that's very reliable. I would check it with the car running. That's how I've always done it, just to make sure everything's circulating. And then if you have it running, you would check it with the hot mark to make sure it's on the hot mark, If it doesn't have a hot and cool, it'll be just like the oil dipstick where it just has a high and low. You just want it somewhere in between the high and the low, preferably closer to the high. Yeah, that's how you would do it if we could.
Alright, so now we're going to show you how to check your power steering fluid, and then we're going to show you how to fill it if you needed to. Okay, so first you need to find your reservoir where you put the fluid. It's different on all cars, of course, but if you need to find it or if you're having trouble finding it, find your belt, because the belt powers the power steering pump, and so your reservoir is going to be right by the belt. Okay, so on mine it's right here. Alright, and mine doesn't, but it'll normally have a steering wheel or say power steering fluid on it or something like that, okay? Mine just says ATF only. So you go ahead and unscrew the cap. And when you pull it up, it's gonna have a high and a low or something along those lines. Mine just has two lines, as you can see. That middle line right there is your low, top line is your high. And as you can see by it dripping off, if you can see that, I'm good on power steering fluid. Alright, so now I'm going to show you how to fill the power steering fluid. So your car needs to be on, and what you would do is you go ahead and take the cap off. Of course you need the cap off to fill it. You're going to put the fluid in there all the way up until it's at the high mark, and after that you're going to get in the car as it's still running, and you're going to turn the steering wheel all the way to the right, all the way to the left. You do that about 5 or 6 times, and the reason you're doing that is because it's pushing air out and replacing it with fluid, because you want it to be all fluid, no air. Anyways, then you're going to come back out and you're going to check it again and make sure it hadn't dropped, and if it has, of course, you're going to fill it back up. You can do that a couple times to make sure it's staying there, because that means there's no more air in there and the fluid is where it needs to be.
Alright, so this isn't a common fluid that you normally need to check. It doesn't really wear out or anything like that, but we're going to show you how you would check and fill your brake fluid. Filling your brake fluid kind of varies because if you haven't changed your brake pads in like a really long time, they're worn down a certain degree. The pistons in the caliper, which I've talked about in previous videos, will be pushed out a certain amount, and there's extra fluid in those calipers, which takes it out of the reservoir. So sometimes if you have low brake pads and you fill your brake fluid up, they go to change your pads out. Once they push those caliper pistons back in, it'll actually push fluid out of your master cylinder. It'll be too full, blah, blah, blah. So you want to kind of base it off how worn down your brake pad should be. If it's super, super low, I recommend filling it just a little bit at least anyways, because if you run out of brake fluid, it's a big deal. You can't stop. But you can come over, your brake fluid on every vehicle, it's going to be right here. No matter what vehicle you're driving, it's going to be somewhere on this vicinity, right in front of where you would be sitting, because it has your master cylinder and your brake booster attached to it. And that's always right in front of the driver's seat. This is the reservoir for the master cylinder, which actually compresses the brakes, and that's what gives you your brakes. You would pull your cap off. Some vehicles like this one, you'll just be able to see it. Some might have a reading, high or low. Some on the reservoir, like this one, will have a minimum and a maximum. You'll just kind of base it off that. It's not a fluid that's super important. You don't have to pump your brakes while you're filling it, anything like that. Just throw some fluid in there if it's too low, you'll be good to go. Also, if you did buy some brake fluid and didn't use all of it, you want to make sure that you put some kind of plastic seal in while you close it, because brake fluid, if it sits on the shelf, it'll absorb water.
All right, now we're gonna show you how to check your coolant level, your antifreeze level, same thing. Anyways, you're gonna find your cap is typically gonna be at the front of your car because that's where your radiator is. If it's not there, if you found your radiator and there's no cap over there, then you're gonna have a secondary reservoir, which I don't have, so I can't really show you that, but it's gonna be somewhere else and it will have a cap. And that's where you're going to fill the fluid into. But that's only if you don't have one on top of your radiator, which I do. And it's gonna be at the front of your car, of course. Right here is mine. So you go, and if you've driven the car recently, it's gonna have pressure in it. So you're gonna wanna press down whenever you are unscrewing it. So as you're unscrewing your cap, you gotta put pressure on it because there's pressure and it'll spew up on you and it's real hot. That's why you gotta put that pressure down, okay? And you're gonna hear a little tss, and that's just letting out that pressure, okay?
Like a soda.
So on mine, I've got this little, I guess I'd call it a reverse dipstick. It just sits in the fluid and floats, and that shows me if it's going up top there that I've got good enough coolant levels. If yours isn't weird like mine, it has a backwards dipstick, then you'll just see the fluid and it has to be full. So you'll be able to see the fluid, of course. So if you needed to fill it, I don't because mine has enough fluid in there, but if you needed to, you need to turn the car on first. Your car has to be on because as the engine starts to get hotter, or as the motor starts to heat up, your thermostat's gonna open and close. And as it opens, there's air in there, so it's gonna pull fluid. Same concept as the power steering. Anyways, it's gonna pull that fluid in. So just because you have it full doesn't mean you have enough coolant in there as it's heating up. So you need to start your car and then you need to fill it and watch it.
All right, so this isn't typically a fluid that you would normally check, you know, just checking the oil and stuff like that. But we're gonna show you how you would properly check and fill your AC system because it's summer and it's hot and we want AC. So if you're coming over to the car, this car specifically, you can't really just say it's in one spot with these. It's wherever the AC lines are ran from the compressor. You can find the compressor from the front of the serpentine belt, but you just kind of have to find the lines. There'll be metal, straight metal lines. There'll be metal and rubber lines. You just kind of have to find them. Normally they'll say a high or low, or have an H or an L on the fitting, but if you come over here, this fitting right here, I can open it. There we go. This is the high side fitting. This is not where you would fill your AC. This fitting is bigger and it won't connect with this hose. I'm gonna demonstrate because a lot of people try to do it. They think they have the wrong hose, blah, 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 but you don't. Because this hose will fit any car from 96 to above, period. So you would pull, click down, see how it's way too big, can't fit over at all, period. So that's not the one. You would find the other one, which this one is up here. This one is a smaller fitting. So you'll spin that one off. And you've located your fitting. Now this is when you would go to start the vehicle. You would turn your AC on high, make sure everything is circulating. Because if you're wanting to fill your fluid, you want the fluid to circulate. You would take your hose after the car is on. Because if you don't, this is kind of I didn't know this for a long time either. If you put this gauge on and start your car, when it first starts up, the pressure it sends to the gauge will actually blow the gauge out. And then your gauge won't work anymore, then you won't properly fill your car. So you want the car started and the AC running before you hook your gauge up. So you'd get it started, blah, blah, blah. You would pull up on the tab up here and then just push down until it locks. Can't go anywhere. And then on this, I recommend to always use a gauge if you're trying to fill your AC because you can overfill your AC and it will blow hot because of it. If you have too much pressure inside there, because with so much pressure, the fluid can't move fast enough to cool. You would take your gauge. This one is already reading way high. The car is off. He has some problems with the AC system right now. We're trying to work out too, so ignore that. but you would want to read your gauge somewhere in between, 35 to 45. You want it to be somewhere in the green. If it's over in the red like this, you have too much fluid or you have another problem inside your AC system. You don't need to add Freon. Don't try to add Freon, you can make it worse. If it's at the bottom half of this gauge, if it's in the white or on the needle or just maybe even a hair below the green, then you would want to add some. You would pump the trigger, and the trigger resets every time you pull it, so you kind of have to sit there and kind of play with it for a little while, and you would just watch the gauge climb, and then once it got it to about the middle, then it would be full. Go and check, see if it's cold. If it's cold in your car, you're good to go. You can pop your fitting off like so, and you're good to roll. That's how you check and properly fill your AC system.